that as well, because you're changing your relationship with fear is also working on your relationship with anxiety. And yes, you've got anxiety. Everyone out there listening, whether you like it or not, you do. Again, it's why you're alive.
Longtime fans of the show should be familiar with the lender formerly known as Sue Pullen, and I'm pleased to announce that she's back, fresh off a rebrand and ready to help as Sue Mackey. Sue is a certified mortgage advisor at Fairway Independent Mortgage, an equal housing lender who focuses on finding the right product for you and your needs. She has over 20 years of experience helping thousands of homeowners. Whether it's purchasing, refinancing, or even a reverse mortgage, Sue will help. Sue's licensed in 36 states now, so reach out and let Sue Mackey it happen for you. The best way to reach her is just give her a call at 520-977-7904 or in an email, spullen@fairwaymc.com. Fairway Independent Mortgage has an MLS number of 2289. Sue Mackey has an MLS number of 206048. That email again, spullen@fairwaymc.com, and that phone number is 520-977-7904. Shoot Sue an email and let her know she needs to update that address. Disclaimer time. This is where I tell everyone to lighten up. It's just a podcast. Trading is like that roller coaster at the amusement park. Thrilling, unpredictable, and potentially stomach-churning. What works for one person might leave another clutching their hat in the wind. Our hosts and guests, they're awesome, knowledgeable, full of insights, but we're not financial advisors. So don't rush to make any investment decisions based solely on our banter. Always consult with a professional or do your own research. Plus, let's face it, we like to have fun, laugh, enjoy the trading ride together. It's all in the name of good podcasting fun. So remember, take it easy, don't bet the farm, and keep your seatbelts on at all times. Thank you for listening. Oh, I forgot to ask, are we going to have homework? Ah, dang, I love homework.
You want homework?
I like homework. If we're going to do months between them, we could probably do a little.
I'm sure I can come up with something during our discussion.
Right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Trading Endgame, our newest miniseries with Sound Performance Psychology's Son Sawyer that's unlocking all of the trading emotions. We are going to be taking a deep look into the major emotions around trading in an attempt to better understand exactly what they're trying to protect us from. Now, before we get started, quick reminder to everybody that they can listen in to these recordings live in Sean's private but free Discord. We'll also be pulling questions from the Q&A portion from all you dedicated souls listening in, so please post them as you think of them. We'll make sure they get answered before we cut the cameras. Now, Sean, if people want to join to listen in, how do we do that? They just got to message you, or... I've been telling everyone just DM you privately or me for access to the Discord. Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I when I tweeted it out, I just said, you know how to get a hold of me. So I've gotten some emails. I get some.
Okay.
I get some, messages, some texts. So for you, yeah, that's how.
Okay.
If you've worked with me, if you've completed the workshop or you've worked with me one-on-one, just it's all come on in.
You got a new 6-week workshop starting on.
Yeah. So I've got a workshop coming up. Go to soundperformancepsychology.com. We will be going through all this stuff and more.
If anybody wants to know more, they can go to soundperformancepsychology.com. I'll make sure I have links for that so you can just sign up directly there. All right, and then last thing I'll say for promotions, and we'll get that done, is if you enjoy the conversation we have today, I highly encourage everyone to check out soundperformancepsychology.com because there is a ton of material there that'll keep you busy to our next recording. Now, Sean, you want to kind of give a little explanation on how we're kind of structuring these episodes? Because I believe we're trying to take this from a different approach than I think most people look at the emotions. We're not looking at this from like a control and domineering side of things. That's definitely not your style.
No. We are structuring these episodes in a way to view emotions from a functional perspective, what they do for us, both that is effective and ineffective for trading, what they do for us that's both effective and ineffective in life, and hopefully start to help people create a new relationship with these emotions. And I chose the 6 that we're going to be focusing on through the series because they're what I'm bumping into the most with people I work with individually, and what I hear a lot of questions about in workshops and group coaching and whatnot.
Okay, so I'm guessing then probably fear was the number one. That's probably why we're starting with this one.
Fear is at the top of the list. Yes, a part of what we're talking about today. This fear, I'm going to talk about it in a relatively broad way because where your fear comes from is going to be very different. Your FOMO isn't different than my FOMO. My F is different than your F.
Right.
So I'm going to answer it. I'm going to keep today and all these answers as much as I can in the context of that neurobiological, psychological processes that are going on intraday
Hmm.
for all of us. So, what triggered it is going to be very different based on our lives, based on our experiences, based on our just our hardwiring.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, that's something that I think I've been dealing with quite a bit, and I've actually written down some personal examples here. Should we need them later? But I think one of the interesting things that I wanted to start with, though, is how fear like helps us, because I think that's one of the things that people skip over a lot when they talk about fear. Is it's not all bad, right?
no, if you are listening to this recording right now, you are listening to it because fear. So thank it,
Really?
because it's why you're alive. Period.
Ah, yes,
It's why
yes.
you're alive. You'd be dead without it. Um, a lot of people take that negative view and they talk about, how fearful trading or fear is the biggest thing they see in trading issues. And, you know, it's certainly up there, but if you don't understand its full function, its full power,
Hmm.
you're not going to change it enough to have it decrease its impact on your trading.
Gotcha.
You're never going to eliminate it. It's always going to be there because you need it to be. Like I said, you're alive. Thank it. Um,
I think one of the biggest struggles for me has been just trying to figure out what exactly it is I'm afraid of. And like I think in order to even get to that point to be able to even ask that question, like you got to build a different type of awareness. So I don't know, maybe that's where we need to start.
sure, sure. That sounds good. I think that's a really good point.
Hmm.
And, you know, if you've heard me talk about mindfulness. So
Right.
that's going to be the best way, in my opinion, to work on your relationship with fear. Although there are definitely other ways. I mean, whether they're spiritual or whether they are, um, through exposure, life experiences, a lot of ways to deal with it. But the mindfulness practices, the, you know, for trader talk, the in the zone practices to work on how you relate to trading are going to be the most fruitful because you're never going to control it or stop it or dominate it in your mind vice despite whatever you've been told anything happening. So when you understand its upsides, you hate it. You tend to dislike its downsides more. If that makes sense. I mean, it's like
Hmm.
it's like a friend you don't like, and then you realize, wow, this person's kind of great.
Hmm.
Or it's a friend you didn't think much of, and you grow closer, and you're like, wow, this person's so helpful, even though sometimes they're a pain in my ass. I would kind of relate it to that to that. I
Yeah,
would think most people can probably relate to that.
I think so. I think we have that
Um,
know-it-all friend that like, damn it, he's right again.
Yeah, there's that type of just,
Right.
whatever it is that makes you uncomfortable, that you tend to judge, whether it's judging yourself or others. Um, and what happened, what I just described there is a relationship that had changed. And that's exactly what people need to do with anger
It's
is
interesting that you
yeah.
kind of it seems like you've kind of personified fear a little bit. I don't know if that's something that you meant to do there, where you kind of gave it some personal characteristics almost.
Tell me what you mean.
You kind of gave him. I mean, you said he's like an old friend to start with. You said he's got some You kind of gave him some characteristics or some.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. I did. You do, and the reason for that is because you need to build part of building that relationship is identifying them. And I can't tell you how many times during a one-on-one session or something I've emailed someone this my emotion wheel, and how many times I've seen people's eyes roll or them stop catching themselves in an eye roll, and then weeks later they're like the thing's printed out on their desk and they're using it all the time because it's just it's incredibly important to paint the picture of what your fear looks like. What if I like visuals, so like you know if there's two of me in a room and one of them is pissed and one of them isn't, how do I tell them apart?
Right. Right.
And that's a serious question you gotta start thinking about yourself, and that might be the way you feel, it might be a look on their face, it might be the clothes the clothes that they're wearing, it could whatever. Visually distinguish, how can I tell I'm angry? And then, of course, it's the result of the mindfulness work, the result of the mindfulness work where, that when your brow is furrowed, your forearms might have some tension, or your hands, your skin's a little flushed, your heart rate's up, maybe your jaw's tight. And it doesn't have to be any of those by any means. And if it is all of them, definitely got to work on that. But it's those things that that friend is walking in the room when you can identify that stuff. That
Right.
formerly annoying friend you're working on the relationship with, you need to be able to know when they walk in the room, and you'll know, one, by what they look like, and two, by what they feel like. And coming up with some kind of label is good too. Like, even a unique name for it. That's something that is an established part of it.
Fearful Freddy or.
Yeah, exactly. That's you're into, so you are familiar with the internal family systems model.
Mhm.
Those are different parts you walk in the room.
Right, right.
And the more familiar you are, the more you can know. And if you're like, all right, I know that I'm scared, then you can have some choices to make. And again, along the lines of um, more benefits to fear. You got to remember, fear is actually uh, can be very beneficial for decision making.
Mhm.
The difference is there's fear when you're in fight, flight, or freeze, and there's fear when you're not in fight, flight, or freeze. You can have fear and not be in fight, flight, or freeze. It's not synonymous. It is a common activation for it,
Right.
but it is not synonymous, because there's that subtle fear that I mentioned in the beginning that is really functional. The fear that makes you drive on the right side of the road so you don't die. You're
Yes,
not in
yes.
your most people aren't in their car scared and sticking to the right side of the road. They're just doing it.
Mhm.
But it is fear. It's your, some people might get cutesy and call it a life force or something, whatever. Like, that is part of fear.
Hmm.
Life force is not wanting to die. It's the force of life. They have a correlation.
It's the fear of what happens when you break the rules that keeps you from straying outside of them. Like, I don't speed because I don't want to get pulled over, not necessarily because I'm afraid of what'll happen, but even just the hassle of being pulled over is enough
Yeah,
for me to be afraid of, quote unquote.
exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
you mentioned the emotion wheel that you have, and I was actually looking at that the other day. Or I was I noticed a tinge of fear when I pulled that up, and I thought about how many of these that I've experienced, and I was like, man, I really hope that this is a common experience from other people. It's like, is there something broken with me that I feel like I have to check every single one of these off?
What you check off everything under the on the
Everything on like the
emotion wheel.
left side. I feel like I can check all of those. Not all at once, but I feel like I have checked them all.
No, that's why it's written that way.
Yeah.
No, in fact, I think it just speaks to greater emotional intelligence, because you have some nuance.
Hmm.
Um, you know,
Actually, the one that really stood out to me was the predicting, the prognosticating like trades. I actually had to make a note of it in my journal today because I found myself trying to predict losses on trades I wasn't even taking, and I felt like that was actually stemming from a place of fear.
yeah, yeah, and is that such a problem? Maybe, but you got to understand, like, maybe you prognosticate when the market conditions aren't great.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe you prognosticate and chop,
Hmm.
and if you do, prognosticate away, baby. Like,
Right.
what's the problem? And so again, it's that, and this is where, so I mentioned functionality, functional analysis. Now there's contextual analysis. What context is this happening in?
Hmm.
And it takes some paying attention. Know thyself, right? Um, so if the context is chop or whatever, maybe it's useful. Or
Right.
you know, you know, part of my model includes, in the morning, kind of going through a checklist of things that are potential life stressors, just to make sure you're paying attention to everything. And those things might come into play and be um, playing a role in fear as well. So, you know, where the fear comes from, I believe part was the part of what you were first saying, is like where fear comes
Mm-hmm.
from.
I think
It,
from or if you're asking, I'm sorry,
yeah,
didn't mean to interrupt.
yeah, no,
If you're asking in this specific instance, I think it was just like you said. It was kind of a choppy day. Like, it wasn't the perfect
mhm.
setup that I like to see. It was good enough to put an entry on, but then I was able to. I think I I think I reacted correctly to it. I think it was there trying to warn me and caution me, and I think I heeded it like I should. I don't feel like it was like that fight, fight, or freeze, or you know what I mean?
Yes, yes. That's pragmatism and
Right,
acceptance.
right.
And fear helps with pragmatism and acceptance. It's not all this big bad monster. There's so many
Yeah,
smart people out there that I see talking about fear. I'm just like, wow, I can't believe just
it's almost like
people feel.
they're afraid of fear.
Yeah, they're afraid of fear. I mean, fear of fear, that's called panic. But anyways,
Yeah.
yeah, fear of fear is definitely a thing. Intense fear of fear is called panic. But it's also just the misunderstanding, the only understanding, like the really punch you in the face, painfully obvious low-hanging fruit
Right.
of the problems with fear. And that's what mostly you hear people talking about. And I think it causes more harm than good.
Mm-hmm.
If you're getting half the information, I mean, it's like, remove all the red candles on a chart. Is that chart is useful?
No.
Why are we eliminating half of the data that we're taking in by saying don't have fear? It's um it's one of the most common errors or, I guess it's just ignorance, that I see out there in the, FinTwit world, amongst both, some actually, no, I'm not gonna go there, fuck that.
I think new cutting edge psychology says,
Yes, thank you. Fear is it's just data,
yeah.
and how we work with that data is how we work with that data, the same way you work with, the data you get from your TPO, your footprint, your candlesticks, your options flow, your whatever, I've never touched bonds, whatever.
So
Just data.
how much of fear is, I guess I don't know if that's the right term. Like something interesting that I noticed, and I don't know if there's maybe something to this or not, but this go on a trip with me here. This might be a little bit of a roundabout one here,
Okay.
but I was having some issues with like sensitivity on one of my teeth when I was brushing it. I was
Uh-huh.
feeling pain every time I brushed my teeth, and it got to the point where I was getting like afraid to brush my teeth
Yeah.
because I was afraid of the fear that was or the pain that I was going to be experiencing. But
Yeah.
the way I got past that was I actually stopped and like almost tried to like feel the pain instead of letting it instead of like trying to interpret what it was going to be. It was almost like let me just stop and listen and see what I'm actually feeling. Can I like almost surgically, like as a doctor, can I describe it? Where is it? How intense is it? Does it come in waves? And when I kind of looked at it clinically like that, then the fear was gone and even the pain was gone. Like it didn't really actually hurt anymore at that point. So I guess how much of fear is like in our minds about like what we're anticipating the result to be versus what actually is going to happen.
Well, so that's kind of two questions, I think.
Yeah.
Uh,
And this
the
is good. If
first
this is
part,
too much aside, then we can cut that. But
no, no.
okay.
I think it's a good question. I think it's kind of two. So to your first point, in the toothbrushing example, the process you're describing, there's two major processes that I saw. One was willingness, and one was acceptance.
Okay.
Um, and that was to end the first process, which was avoidance, which did come from fear.
Yes. Yes.
Fear has a predictive nature, and that's part of the function of fear. Oh, I've seen, lions drinking water down by this pond. I'm not going there.
Right.
Or, I watched Bambi get yanked into the river by a alligator over there. I'm not going to go over there and drink water. You know, you need that predictive nature of fear. The problem is when the predictive nature is like, it's World War III. Oh my
Right.
God. I mean, just this past weekend was such a great example
Oh
of
yeah.
nonsense. And that's also called memory tagging, is what one of the functions of fear.
Mm.
And it makes memories stick so that you remember the helpful things like the examples I just gave. But, and obviously, the downside is that 5 figure, 6 figure, whatever that big ass loss you had out there, folks,
Hmm.
that is also going to memory tag, and that's going to be a problem.
Right.
Memory tagging doesn't discriminate, unfortunately.
So now every time you're in a situation that kind of reminds you of that big loss, you're gonna pull up all the same feelings and remember that.
That's pretty much, and you're not
Mm.
gonna have and it doesn't mean you have to consciously think of it either. It
Right.
can just be one little piece of the memory, which memories are comprised of anything that comes in through the senses. So, sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, I mean, that can activate the memory, so you really don't know where it's coming from. and it can be problematic. Now, the last part of your question, can you say that to me again?
It's just, I guess the question is like, how much of fear is just based on what we've built up in our minds about what we think the
Ah,
outcome
yeah,
is going
yeah.
to be, like projection almost, I guess.
Yes. So that's why I mentioned the predictive
Hmm.
quality of fear, and that's the more problematic part, or
Right.
can be the more problematic part in this, right? The helpful side of it is, we'll start there, because there's plenty of it.
Sure.
Fear is why you put in stops.
Hmm.
Fear is why you got your brackets for you futures traders. Fear is
Daily
your
loss
bottom
limit.
line daily loss limit. Thank you. Your maximum, drawdown on an option or whatever.
Hmm.
So yes, it needs to be there. And you need to know consciously that that is fear. And that's going to work on that relationship with that sort of annoying friend that is, maybe he's not so bad. Maybe we'll call him this weekend. That relationship is changing, you know?
Tell you what, he makes
And
a shitty dip.
let me tell you, buddy, I make a mean roasted red pepper hummus. Okay. Um, for the record out there. But yeah. And to your point, we also can, see the worst. And to your point, it can also be a big problem. It can
Hmm.
help you, catastrophize, make a
Right.
catastrophe, predict something bad in the future, and it stops you from, trading effectively or whatever. So remember, fear is also a form of anxiety. Um,
Mm.
it has a big overlap, at least in a diagram with anxiety.
Hmm.
So what you're talking about, and the most straightforward example or explanation of what worry is the key component, the dominating, characteristic of anxiety.
Right.
Worry is you make up a scenario about the future. What happens when, my parent passes? What happens when that bill comes due? What happens when we bomb Iran? What happens, whatever? And we
Yeah.
make up a scenario in our head. Oil's gonna rip. So and so's not gonna like me. I'm not gonna do well. Whatever. We make up that scenario and we become distressed by that thing we've made up,
Right.
and it affects our health, our anxiety, our stress, our stomach, or whatever. And that's called apprehensive expectation. And that's the root of worry and anxiety. And then so we'll recontextualize a little bit for fear. You know, it's the same thing. It's, oh shit, this is gonna happen. This is black swan, we're going down, whatever. Or, just like, oh, I'm gonna blow this account, or, you prop traders are like, oh, I'm gonna, you know, undo my good work or whatever it is.
Hmm.
Um, we also make up that story about the future, believe it, and then get upset about it. So all of these things we've mentioned or I've talked about up to this point will help with that as well, because you're changing your relationship with fear is also working on your relationship with anxiety. And yes, you've got anxiety. Everyone out there listening, whether you like it or not, you do. Again, it's why you're alive.
I used to think I wasn't much of a worrier, but I think trading has exacerbated it, or at least brought out a place where that worrying can excel. 'Cause-
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
right.
It is fertile ground.
Right.
It's fertile ground for our issues. It
Oh
it it,
man.
it just is. I mean, it is lush black soil, and we've got the best, seeds, and they're germinated and rolling. I mean, it's just
So talk to me then about there's a very familiar scenario you just walked through about creating a situation in your mind and then suddenly getting distressed about this hypothetical that hasn't even happened
Mhm.
yet. So
Right.
how do you interrupt that cycle? Like how do you, I don't want to say like stop it or control it, but like what's the takeaway from that? Like how do you react in that moment when you catch that? How do you build an awareness of that? Like, what's the right term here to use?
Those I like awareness. What you do is you add to it.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to change any relationship with your emotion, you need to add to the experience. And adding to the experience could be attention, like mindful attention. adding to the experience can be some of the things we've discussed, like, that visualization of like what that side of you looks like, or that metaphor about the friend.
Mm-hmm.
You need to paint that picture. And the primary tool that I like to use and teach people about and practice with them and is called diffusion or disentanglement. And
Mm-hmm.
or we get these thoughts and we take them as facts.
Yeah.
And thoughts are not facts; they are thoughts. Even if you think about a fact, it's still a thought. Um, you know, it is a neurobiological process in your brain. So you can add any of those things we've talked about, or you can add just things like, I'm noticing my mind is telling me again that I'm going to blow this. I'm noticing my I'm noticing the thoughts that I suck
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. And, you know, learning by addition is how we learn our whole lives. Psychology made a huge mistake that's important to know about
Mm-hmm.
in the 70s, where they kind of reinforced this concept where they wanted to help people change the thoughts by fighting them. And that doesn't work so well. It has some short-term effectiveness, and
So,
long-term it makes things worse. It actually uh enhances the strength of the thought
mm.
and creates more neural ties, meaning now there'll be even more triggers, and even like positive thoughts that you try to challenge it with. Like, if you have the thought, I'm a bad trader, and I'm a good trader, and I here's 10 examples, and I'm going to read them off.
Can I tell you that?
History isn't just boring names and dates. It's weird, messy, and full of what were they thinking moments. The Buck Starts Here dives into the financial fiascos, questionable deals, and outright chaos that helped build America, $1 at a time. We mix in serious history from a fresh perspective, real, deep dives into the numbers and the moments that shaped the country, without the boring lecture. From presidential blunders to almost states, and the time an international war almost started over a pig, we break down the key events that made, and nearly broke, the nation. It's the fascinating, untold history you won't find in the textbooks. Subscribe to the Buck Starts Here podcast for a deeper look at presidential history that's anything but dull.
Longtime fans of the show should be familiar with the lender formerly known as Sue Pullen, and I'm pleased to announce that she's back, fresh off a rebrand and ready to help as Sue Mackey. Sue is a certified mortgage advisor at Fairway Independent Mortgage, an equal housing lender who focuses on finding the right product for you and your needs. She has over 20 years of experience helping thousands of homeowners. Whether it's purchasing, refinancing, or even a reverse mortgage, Sue will help. Sue's licensed in 36 states now, so reach out and let Sue Mackey it happen for you. The best way to reach her is just give her a call at 520-977-7904 or in an email, spullen@fairwaymc.com. Fairway Independent Mortgage has an MLS number of 2289. Sue Mackey has an MLS number of 206048. That email again, spullen@fairwaymc.com, and that phone number is 520-977-7904. Shoot Sue an email and let her know she needs to update that address. Can I walk you through the example that I did? Just let me know if this is the right track, because it gets really tricky with some of these. But
Yes.
one of the thoughts that I challenged, I don't know if challenge is the right word, but I ended up using I think the term you use is self-compassion.
Yep.
So it was I am afraid right now, but I'm working on it, or but I'm
Great.
improving, or something along those lines. I don't know if that's the exact thought, but it was something along those lines. Like, this is what it is now, but I am working, or I'm taking steps to address this, or I'm taking steps to build awareness, or something like that.
One suggestion I
Mm-hmm.
would make on that is not this is not just semantics, it might sound like it, but change the but to an and.
That was what I wanted to ask about specifically, was the
Okay.
but.
There you go.
So I think that's
Yeah.
actually hilarious you brought that up.
It's really key.
Yeah.
People aren't used to thinking that. They're not used to thinking or, experiencing things in a way where they're like, "Oh, I had a shitty day, but at least, you know."
Yeah, when you say that, it feels like they're not working together. It's like one is fighting the other one. It's still
it's adversarial, yeah. And
that. Yes, thank you.
it also creates neural links with the with both sides of that adversarial
Hmm.
relationship, so it starts to activate the other one. So it would be, something like I'm noticing the thought that I'm a bad trader, and I'm using diffusion to work on it right now, and
Hmm.
I'm trying to, you know, practice being nicer to myself, whatever. That's all adding to.
Hmm.
It's not taking away, it's not fighting, it's adding to. And in fact, that thought so theoretically, you could have that thought every 5 minutes till the day you die. But if you're diffused from it, it really won't matter that much,
Yeah.
because it's just, this you, and when you change that relationship with fear, fear is just a passing phenomenon. That fear,
Hmm.
that's all got us all wound up tight. And it can become that light.
Yeah. I'd say any of the thoughts that you have that cause any of that stress or anxiety, almost all of them are passing. Like just
Oh yeah.
even just the act of, like you said, like taking that moment to say, I'm noticing this thought. Like I feel like just having that thought in my head, I'm noticing the thought, that is enough to like take me out of whatever that emotional response reaction loop that I'm stuck in.
Yeah. You take that time, you breathe, you maybe say one of those diffusion type thoughts I mentioned.
Hmm.
And eventually, as they say, if you meditate long enough on the river bank, the bodies of your enemies will float by. In
Nice.
this case, that would be, I guess, your demons.
Right. So one of the I think the running themes, I think, is going to be throughout this series is probably going to be befriending each of these different emotions.
Yes.
So what are some things that we can do to try to like befriend fear? How can we try to make him more of a, I guess, an ally as opposed to an adversary?
Well, phew. I guess the first place, well, uh, mindfulness is the first place to start with
Yep.
everything.
Yep.
Um, it's really difficult to do this work without having an ability to observe yourself in a particular kind of way, and that's what mindfulness will do. So there's that, which is super important.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that in terms of trading, you can list your bigger fears related to trading and rank them,
Mm-hmm.
and arrange them in a way, like, least scary first, all the way up to the worst. And and whatever they are, well, depending on what they are, you can kind of gradually expose yourself to them. You can gradually, you know let yourself experience them, as we were talking about earlier. Like, feeling them is the way that they're gonna change. So
Well, what if it's spiders?
you'll
What if I'm afraid of spiders?
are you literally, you're asking about
No,
phobias?
I'm literally afraid of spiders. I don't know if feeling them is going to be something I want to do.
So not that well, not feeling well. Okay, we're talking about
That's probably more of a
pho-
phobia, actually.
phobias are a
Yeah.
completely
Yeah.
different
Okay.
thing.
Completely different.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you there.
No, that's fine. Okay, what did I say? Mindfulness. Oh, the ranking of stuff.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Um, because first of all, sitting down and doing it is working on the relationship you have with those things, and ranking them as some acceptance of, like, okay,
Hmm.
this one's really bad, this one's not so bad. Um, you know, those work.
What do you mean by that? The acceptance like that? What do you mean by this is so bad and this one's not so bad?
Because if you're ranking them in order of how strong they are,
Yeah.
you know, whatever's number 10 on that scale, like the most scary, is going to feel a lot different than whatever number 1 on that
Right.
scale,
Okay.
less scary. So by doing the exercise, there's an acceptance of, these are I have fears. I'm willing to write them down, and not be a big baby
Mm.
and avoid them anymore.
Just the act of writing them down is a form of confronting them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Ranking them,
Yeah.
having to think about them and compare them to each other. Those are all
Yeah.
a piece of the puzzle. Um, Kind of what you were saying earlier, like the emotion wheel.
Hmm.
Do some research on fear. Read about or where its evolutionary history. I think is a good thing to know. Like, they
Mm.
call it psychoeducation in my business, but that kind of stuff is a decent it's a decent intervention for anxiety. Is just education. It's really important because anxiety is a complicated thing.
That's such a great idea. I mean, how many things seem like magic? And I think there's actually a famous quote, right? There's any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah,
I think that's a great idea.
yeah. All of that adds to the process of acceptance. Um, remember, journaling fear.
Yeah.
Uh, I also, I use a system intraday where about if I'm trading a whole market day, about 5 times there'll be a reminder that pops in front of me that has me checking, my level of emotionality. I use a scale of -5 to +5. Um,
Yours is the feels score, correct?
Feel score, yeah. It's out there. I've tweeted copies of it and stuff. Um,
Those are listen to the stuff I did with Rich. It's I think the scale is similar to the set scores that Rich uses.
okay. So, if you're down in the negatives, you got to figure out what that is. Um, and the active rank of rating it, quantifying it. Some people find it pretty frustrating and challenging, and it is, but suck it up. So is trading.
I
Um,
think that's just our perfectionist nature. I'm speaking for myself because I hate trying to figure out how to rank those. Because you put a number down, it's like, is it right? I don't know. I want to be right.
Now, remember the scale that I based the feel scale on is something called the subjective units of distress scales.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter. It is subjective to you. And you say an 8, I say an 8, they probably mean completely different things,
Right.
but it doesn't matter because it's about what's going on inside our skin and how we interpret it. So um that works on that relationship with fear or whatever, because again, you're paying attention to it. And for me, if I'm on that scale, if I'm outside the range of -3 to +3, I do not take trades. And if I realize it when I'm in a trade, I cut it,
Hmm.
or at least move the stop, and or I cut and leave a runner. Like I do something to reduce the risk, because an activated sympathetic nervous system, aka fight, flight, or freeze, increases risk exponentially. It doesn't matter how talented you are. You're a human, and now you're in fight, flight, or freeze, so you're a little less human. You're a little more monkey.
That's a good way to word it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Getting close to, I think, the point where we can start getting to the end here. So if you wanted to, I think, touch on some things that people can do, or maybe some mechanisms or tools that they can use if they find themselves in a extreme fear moment.
Yeah. So if you're in the so on that scale, for example, hey, if you're in an extreme fear moment, you better not be trading.
Right,
You
right.
better be dumping a trade. And if you don't, and clearly you've already gone too far. You're not paying attention. You're not, like I said earlier, you're not learning how to notice when that part of you is walking in the room, through paying attention to what's going on inside your skin, through education, through mindfulness, for all those things. So that's big one. But if you do catch yourself with intense fear, you do grounding exercises. Google it. I'm not talking about the grounding where you walk around barefoot or hugging trees. If you're into that, cool. But it is a form of it's a very specific type of mindfulness where it focuses you on the present moment, but gets you outside of your head. Mindfulness is a very internal thing. You want to know what's going on inside your skin. Grounding gets you outside of your skin for short term relief. You cannot you can't keep trading. You can't keep doing anything too far outside that range of those threes, whether it's a good feeling
Right.
or a bad feeling. We're sticking with fear, so we're sticking with bad feelings. But or at least unwanted feelings is a more accurate way to put it. So, that is the best way. Tactical breathing, box breathing. Google that. There's actually GIFs out there, GIFs, whatever you call them, that just do it. Like it gives you a little visual to follow, but it's what it sounds like. It's you breathe in for 5 seconds, 7 seconds, whatever fills your lungs. You hold your breath for an equal amount of time. You exhale for an equal amount of time, which means you're going to be pacing your exhale. Then you hold the breath again. So, that's kind of a square or
Yeah,
tactical
yeah.
breathing. And if you are a tough guy out there and you're rolling your eyes, Navy SEALs do it when they're in cold water situations and they're trying to, not lose their shit,
Dude,
because
it works. There's
yeah,
something primeval about yeah, it triggers something. It's quite impressive how well that works.
it's wild. It's
Yeah.
wild.
All right. Well, let's see. So we've gone through kind of how to befriend fear. We've gone through how to deal with crippling fear in the moment. Gone through how to identify fear. Is there anything else that you want to touch on relating to fear?
Yes. I think that it's important to understand fear's roots, the survival roots,
Yeah.
the memory tagging, how, primal and built in it is, and how it can, impair cognition and
Hmm.
um, create anxiety and all kinds of things. But Also that, you know, you will grow by integrating more into your fear. As in those examples I gave, integrating mindfulness into your fear, awareness into your fear, acceptance, willingness. Um, it will grow. It will activate the. People like to talk about neuroplasticity again now, 35 years after we discovered it, and you know, uh, it actually it's very neuroplastic. It works quite well. You can do a lot of rewiring
Mhm.
through practices like that, through integrating. So, you don't want to eliminate fear. You want to befriend and integrate it. And I think that's, oh, and you want it to be a signal too.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's again, it's
Oh,
data.
fear's coming in. Why? Hey, what are you doing here, fear? What are we?
Exactly. Don't ignore it. Don't crush it because you're so manly or whatever. Because actually,
Dominate.
it's quite the opposite. You're
Right.
running like a coward. But anyways, um, you know, roll with it.
Yeah.
You want to, you want to change those behaviors. You want to trade differently, act differently.
Right. Right. John, if somebody wanted to learn more about the fear response, kind of like more of the biomechanics of how that works, like where would be a good resource for that?
Uh, the question is, where can they learn more about it?
Yeah, just a good book that explains kind of more of the mechanism, like if you want to understand like how it works and maybe the evolutionary history of it.
The body keeps the score.
Ah, okay. Who wrote that?
Bessel van der Kolk.
Vander
Bessel
Kolk.
van der Kolk.
That's probably going to do it for today's episode. So if you're listening around the live audience, please stick around because we're going to go straight into the Q&A portion after this. If you're listening to the broadcast, you're probably going to have to wait a couple weeks. And if that's too long, you can always DM Sean or myself, get you access to participate in these live recordings. Visit soundperformancepsychology.com on your way out. Let Sean know you're ready to level up your trading endgame. Be back soon with more emotions to scrutinize, but until that day, like, share, subscribe to all the things, and have a green week. All right, let this recording keep going. I see some stuff in the chat. Did we get any questions dropped in here?
Nice job, dude. I don't know. I was staying away from it so I didn't get distracted.
Oh man, I'm sorry, guys.
I'm so easily distracted.
People were having some issues with the volume. Oh no.
Shut up, really?
Okay, only one guy had
Volume
that
was fine
problem.
for Denny.
Okay, good. All
Then
right.
it's someone being a boomer.
Yep.
Then he knows what he's doing.
Oh, it was Carlos. Yeah, Carlos, I'll set you up with the raw
Carlos,
recording.
what's up, buddy? I haven't seen you in a minute.
All right, we got any questions, guys? Let them chat or drop here. If anybody wants to pop up and talk too, let me know because I want to do a screen share so I can try to capture the words that they're saying. Boomerang.
Who's in the body?
Where was my questions?
Omar,
So I did
Carlos,
get.
Denny, Caesar. Okay.
I think the
Sorry, go
one
ahead.
that I think the questions that I got were probably more along like someone was asking about like specifically prop firms and like how they kind of market to you based on trading edge. Just curious about your take on that. And then somebody else was
No, I'm not ready to bash
okay,
prop
okay.
firms yet publicly.
Right. Okay. And then the other one was a tweet from Jester Trading. He says that the need to focus on trading psychology is the degree to which you rely on discretion in your trading. It's just curious what your thoughts are on that statement.
So I would say perhaps you're right. It's a incredibly specific thing, for each individual. The vast majority of us are discretionary traders. Most of us are not quants. Most of us aren't autists or, computer science, whatever, cracking, doing the exact trade over and over again. But do you, man, whoever asked that question, if that works, do it. Don't worry about it, and don't worry about what we're doing. We'll see who's the liquidity.
Right. I like that. Okay, I got a question for you. This is something that I've found myself, or something that I've talked about in the past, and I'm curious if this is a good idea, bad idea. In the past, I have committed to taking scary trades, quote unquote. Like to try to help me get over the fear of taking those trades. I'm going to commit to taking one of those a day to try to, I guess, I don't know, like you said, expose myself to it almost, maybe try to numb myself to that fear. I don't know. Is that good idea or bad idea?
That's tricky. It's going to depend on the person.
Yeah,
One of the things about this whole episode, which I actually meant to mention, but
you can mention now. We're
I'm
still recording.
okay. A part of what we're talking about today, this fear, I'm going to talk about it in a relatively broad way,
Hmm.
because where your fear comes from is going to be very different. Your FOMO isn't different than my FOMO. My F is different than your F.
Right,
So
right.
I'm going to answer. I'm going to keep today and all these answers as much as I can in the context of that neurobiological, psychological processes that are going on intraday
Hmm.
for all of us. So, what triggered it is going to be very different based on our lives, based on our experiences, based on our hardwiring. So that question that you just asked, you got to repeat it again. I'm so sorry.
The idea of committing yourself to taking a scary trade, is it a good idea or bad idea to try to confront the fear that way?
It wouldn't be. I mean, if it's is it high risk or is it just scary?
It's just scary. It's
Then sure, I just
yeah,
size down.
yeah.
And
Not like out risk.
uh,
Yeah, definitely not like.
yeah, just size down and along the lines of what I was saying before about making the list of fears and working your way up.
Hmm.
Size down, start with a micro, do the same trade with two micros. You know, do that,
Right.
do one micro all week. For the next week, do two. If you're still anxious, do two for 2 weeks, then bring in the third. You know, but give yourself some time in between. Let yourself adjust. When
Right.
you do exposures, what you want to do is you want to be exposed to the thing that is giving you stress or anxiety or whatever, and you want to regulate yourself while you are exposed to it. So you take that trade, then do grounding.
Hmm.
um, make sure you're as close to a zero on the feel scale as you can before that trade, and then put yourself in it. It's going to dysregulate your feels to some degree, obviously, but that's why you're de-risked. And yeah, that can work for people. It is not. I wouldn't say everyone go out there and do that, but it's yourself. And then really what it comes down to is can you trust yourself to do it in a low scale way, in
Right,
a way
right.
that's not going to mess with your account. So that's what I would say is the biggest determining factor is if you could trust yourself.
I mean, I was doing it with a prop firm in this situation, so.
Yeah.
uh, let's see. We got Denny. Are you referring to the phenomena that sometimes the best entries are the most uncomfortable? Because he feels that often. I think I was just getting to the point, Denny, that any entry became very, very scary. So really, I was just becoming afraid to even trade my plan altogether. Um, but yeah, I do agree that sometimes, those
I,
scary entries tend to be. That was
yeah.
kind of, I think, why I was leaning into that a little bit more. But the
I
reason
mean,
why I was
how far?
asked, oh, go
Sorry, go
ahead.
ahead.
The reason why I was asking is because I've said a lot of things on this program, doing this for 5 years, and ever since I've been talking to Sean, I've been a lot more cognizant of not wanting to put bad information out there. So, I just want to make sure that what I've been saying is not wrong.
it's
Or
it's it's tricky.
yeah,
I've said it before. Because we all have the human condition, it's easy for any of us to really get a little too cocky with our psychological
right.
knowledge. I mean, I'm a therapist, and I can't be objective with myself. I can't be objective with someone that I love.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and it's like this common experience, and then now there's all this whatever TikTok psychology, and just there's nonsense there. There's nonsense on FinTwit. There's a lot of stuff like that. So um, now there's even more. Wait, hang on a second. What the fuck was I going to say?
Something on the bite-size education on TikTok.
Yes. Um, Oh yeah, no, hang on, I'll back up. Just the relatability. So everyone has the human condition.
Hmm.
So everyone certainly has an opinion on psychology as they should, and that's part of being a human. But because of the phenomenon of like Americans having scoring horribly on tests, but having the highest confidence on the test that they score so low on, that's an American thing. We kind of
What's
have
that
that
called
tendency.
again?
I for- well, it's Mount Stupid in terms of Dunning Kruger effect,
Dunning Kruger.
but
Yeah.
yeah, it's the Mount Stupid phase of Dunning Kruger. But because it's so universal, I would think about it like this. You know, everyone out there has had diarrhea.
It's still funny.
Just because you've diagnosed yourself with diarrhea and deemed the best intervention to be Pepto-Bismol, and the outcome is diarrhea goes away, does not make you a gastroenterologist. And that is the logic that I see all over the place
Oh,
on social media. And it's freaking absurd and arrogant and delusional and fucking ridiculous. Anyway, no. End that where you want, Laura.
Okay. Here's another good question then. You mentioned the fear being like where it comes from. Are you specifically referencing like lower or higher in the chest, like that portion? Or are you talking about like
no.
the specific thing that's causing the fear, the issue
Correct,
or
yes.
schema?
The issue, the schema, the life experience, the trauma, whatever.
Okay. So
that's a good question.
Yeah. What do you like? Why do you feel the need to differentiate from that? Like, can you give us some examples of?
Well, what I'm saying is for this recording, I'm not, because
okay, gotcha.
It's got to be broad because everyone who's listening is going to have different reasons they're fearful. So that's why I kept it in this, this neurobiological kind of template.
Gotcha.
It's just, you just can't be too specific. And that's why, it is helpful to understand yourself or, work with someone that has a clue, because they can help you identify that stuff. And it doesn't have to necessarily be trading psychology. I mean, you get a quality therapist, start to learn about yourself, and it's going to take you far.
Yeah. Good stuff. I think we got through most of the questions that we got here. Unless somebody has anything else, give another minute here.
If no one's asked, no one's asked. I know my peoples. Thanks, guys, for listening.
Yeah, thanks everybody for jumping in. So yeah, tell your friends, like it, subscribe, share, all the things.
Appreciate it.
This podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only. It does not constitute financial or investment advice and should not be construed as such. The hosts, guests, and contributors of this podcast are not licensed financial advisors, brokers, or professionals. Any trading or investment decisions made based on the content of this podcast are solely at the listener's discretion and risk. Trading and investing in financial markets carry inherent risks, and past performance is not indicative of future results. Listeners should conduct their own research and seek advice from qualified financial professionals before making any financial decisions. The views, opinions, and information shared in this podcast are those of the individual contributors and do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of the podcast creators or associated organizations. Produced by China Shop Productions.